Gallagher.
Afternoon, Chairman. We're now live.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Lincolnshire Pension Board. Unfortunately, we are not quorate at the present time, so I suggest we continue in informal mode. Hopefully Mark will join. If not, we will present the notes to the next Pensions Committee in July to have them formally approved. Welcome to Rashfell and to Jeff. Jeff will be presented later on. Rashfell will be here from KPMG. Apologies, we've got Peter Allen.
Yes, correct. We've got Peter Allen and we're waiting for Councillor Whittington to join today.
Okay. Item 2, declarations of interest. I'd better just declare my daughter is now in the local government pension scheme because she works in special education. Anything else? Any others?
I'm also a contributing member.
My daughter is also a member, contributing member, as a teaching assistant at a Lincolnshire school.
All right, thank you. So, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 11th of January. Shall we just turn the pages on those, please? Anything on page 5, page 6, page 7. We noted there that Ewan couldn't make it today. Page 8 and page 9, page 10. Can I sign those as a correct record? Or agreed?
I can't. I wasn't here, so I didn't attend.
Can I second or? Oh, I'll second those then. Okay. Are there any matters arising that anyone wants to raise before we go on to the pensions update report?
Sorry, if I can just confirm that Ewan will be attending July's pension board meeting to give an update on the shared service.
Okay, thanks, Joe. So shall we move on to item 4 then, which will be you, Joe, will it? Pension fund update report.
It is, thank you, Chairman. And just before I start, if I can just make mention that our current independent chair, Roger, will be stepping down at the next meeting in July. We're currently out for advertisement with a closing date of tomorrow for a successor. But just in case anyone wasn't aware, it will be Roger's last meeting in July, having been with us since the creation of the pension board. So if I move... Sorry.
Can I just for my own clarity, what's the qualification for the independent chairman? What would the qualification be, Joe?
There's no particular qualifications, it's more looking at experience and knowledge. So we went out to advert about a month ago and it's asking for people's experience of chairing, people's involvement in pensions, people's understanding of the LGPS, particularly on the administration and governance side. So we have currently received 2 applications and there's one other individual that I've spoken to that will potentially put in an application form by the end of tomorrow. And then we will be interviewing on April the 12th, and that will be Michelle and I to put a recommendation through to Andrew Crookham as scheme manager to make that appointment.
There's no requirement of link to the Lincolnshire Fund then? It could be any candidate could apply?
There has to be no link to the Lincolnshire Fund. It has to be fully independent. So that is the key criteria, that they have to have no link to the Pensionshire Fund. But yeah, we've had people far and wide interested, to be fair. So yeah, hopefully there will be a good successor to follow all that Roger's done over the past 9 years.
Okay.
Okay, so if I can start, thank you very much, Chairman. So this is the standard quarterly paper, and the key points that I'm going to highlight are on paragraph 1.2 on page 12, updating the board on the status of the TPR training undertaken by the committee, because the board have all completed their training. Section 4 on page 13 updates the board on the activity that's been going on with Border to Coast. The next joint committee is on the 26th of March, and members of the board are reminded any questions that they have, please feed through to Councillor Strengle, who can raise them for you. I did share the JC agenda yesterday, so hopefully you've all had a chance to look at that. And we have had our first question come in that will be going through to JC next week. Section 5 provides some background to the Economic Activities of Public Bodies Overseas Matters Bill that's currently going through Parliament. And what that's going to do, that's going to prohibit certain actions by public authorities. Key points from the bill are set out in paragraph 5.2. The main one being that the bill will prohibit public authorities from making a decision to invest or divest based on its moral or political opinion of the actions of foreign states abroad, or on the opinion of any pressure groups which are seeking to influence. The bill allows interested parties to bring about legal proceedings against the authority or report them to the pensions regulator if they consider an investment decision has been made in contravention to the bill. So potentially this could be an area that could cause the fund and the authority a lot of pain if people decide they are interested parties currently and don't like how investment decisions are made. So there are some considerations set out there in paragraph 5.4 about how we can mitigate any such proceedings happening to the fund. So these are to ensure that anything going to the committee has clear, documented advice on any of the potentially contentious decisions, and that is shared with them and explained prior to any meetings. That any minutes taken make clear reference to any advice and the grounds of any such decisions. And then thirdly, that decisions around the implementation, rather than the strategy, are delegated to officers or the asset pool or other investment managers. So officers will be working with the investment consultant to ensure that any potentially contentious decisions are not open to challenge and are made on valid investment reasons, and that this is properly documented. The final section on 6 on page 16 just provides an opportunity to raise any questions from the March committee meeting with the agenda items set out that were covered this morning. So I'd be happy to take any questions from the board. Thank you.
Any questions? No? Joe, can I just ask you, what was the kind of the motivation for this this bill that's going through?
I think Jeff's probably a better one to answer that one. If I can ask you to step in, Jeff, if you don't mind.
Yeah, it was actually first put forward as an amendment to the Public Service Pensions Act 2023 by Robert Jenrick MP. And it was based on there was some statutory guidance put out by the department. That was statutory guidance effectively said the same sort of thing than this. That was challenged by a particular pressure group that went all the way through to the Supreme Court, and the government lost because the Supreme Court said if you want to do something like this, you need to do it in primary legislation.
Thank you very much for that. So, board are asked to consider, discuss the report, and agree whether any action or additional information is required. I think the only thing I'd suggest is if you've got any further questions for Eddie, when he goes to the joint committee, then send them before Tuesday. Are you happy to accept the recommendation? Yep. Okay, thank you. So, Matt, it's over to you, the pensions admin report, please.
Thank you, Chair. All right, so this is the report from West Yorkshire Pension Fund, the pension administration report, I should add, for the period the 1st of October 23 to the 31st of December 2023. The first point really to speak about is point 1.2 and the KPI and the narrative around that. In Appendix A are the full suite of KPIs, but at 1.2 we're showing some of the areas that didn't meet their targets. At a glance, it perhaps isn't as good as we would normally expect. However, there are circumstances that's dictated that, and I'll try and group some of these together as I explain. Deferred benefits set up on leaving has not met in this period. It's a non-priority piece of work. We do meet our statutory requirements by notifying all leavers that they have a deferred benefit with Lincolnshire Pension Fund. The piece of work that is delayed is where we calculate the value of those benefits and then send them that communication. We have focused our efforts on this area of these cases that have not met, and I've asked for some further figures on these. So hopefully the board is assured by that. And I understand since September we have reduced the numbers by about 50%, but I'm waiting for clarity on that. If we're looking at the areas regarding transfers and interfunds, and an interfund is a transfer between one local government fund to another, they were paused at the beginning of last year when the Government Actuarial Department withdrew the factors. We couldn't complete the processes, couldn't process the calculations without the factors, and there was a delay in providing new factors we could use. That stockpile has or is being worked, but it has been further delayed through vacancies, training when we have recruited, and periods of illness. And of course, this period includes Christmas, so there's periods of leave. But again, we are focusing our attention on this area, and we are recruiting to these posts, so I'm hopeful that those figures will increase. The other area is pension estimates. We would usually process as a priority an estimate with a due date 3 months from now, and then work back to those that have 6, 9, 12, etc. The queue may have been jumped or was jumped by employers submitting large numbers of redundancy and flexible retirement cases with a short date on them within the 3-month period. They went straight to the top of the pile. So the impact I would expect to be short term, but nevertheless in this period there is an impact. Okay. Looking at point 2, our membership is slightly increasing, which is good to see, although I note that active membership is steady. Actually, it's the same number in December 21 as it is in December 23. Deferreds are slightly down as well, so the increase in membership is actually through our pensioners. Employer contacts has been quite interesting. That's point 3. You may remember that our survey of customer satisfaction was quite a manual process, and we would just send out a paper survey, and it would be 100 or 200 perhaps per period. We're trying now to do this through email. We did survey 821 members and only had 21 responses, which is 2.55%. Now, in terms of responses we're getting back, it's probably fairly similar to the paper ones, but we're hitting so many more members that the percentage is poor. We did discuss this week. We're not sure where to go, but we need to put further thought into this, because I don't think that's acceptable really. I think basically what's happening, these are hitting members' inboxes, and probably we're all the same. We don't open them, we don't respond. But if you've got it at the back of a letter of a communication, you're more inclined, particularly when you're looking at you're retiring and you're happy with your pension, you're more inclined to respond. I am actually quite hopeful, of welcome any input from any of our partners in the shared service, where we might go. It might be something worth discussing at the shared service meeting next week. I don't know, but we are looking at that. So we've increased the surveys, but we're not getting anything back from our members. Employer training has continued at a high level. we've tried to mix it up and change it up, give a bit of variety for employers and members. Instead of us delivering it personally, we've recruited Hyman Robertson, a different face, a different voice, a different style, and we can learn from that as well. We might be able to adopt some of that presentation styles that they have. They've been received very well, and those sessions were recorded, and they were available for 2 months, so until February, for people to go back and look at. Internal Dispute Resolution Procedures, IDRP, for this period are actually quite good, I think. We've currently got no Stage 1 appeals against the fund, which is really good. And Stage 1 appeals against scheme employers, there are just 2. One is an appeal against an ill health retirement, or the decision was not to retire on the grounds of ill health. That was turned down and communicated within the period. The second one was again another ill health retirement decision. We have referred that back to the employer. The employer has put another IRMP, another medical practitioner on the case, and a decision was uplifted from a Tier 3 to a Tier 1. So that has been resolved as well, and we communicated with the member on the 20th of December. Stage 2 appeals, there are currently no outstanding there as well, so that's really good. What we do still have outstanding are 2 cases, I think it's 2 cases, with the Pensions Ombudsman. I know they've been here before because there's a bit of a waiting time with the Pension Ombudsman. The first case is a member is unhappy. They did not receive unreduced benefits when they ceased employment, and the employer has confirmed that this was a voluntary resignation and it wasn't redundancy or on the grounds of business efficiency, so there's no entitlement for the member to receive their benefits unreduced. And the other one, again, is a member that's unhappy around the award or not to award an ill health retirement, and simply we have informed the Pension Ombudsman that they did not meet the criteria for an ill health retirement. So as soon as we get a response from the Ombudsman, we'll bring that back to the board. Point 5, shared service update. Staffing, so some good news here. I know we have a handful of vacancies now, 3 or 5 vacancies, but we've filled 8 posts in the service centre through this period. They are currently being trained. The technical team had 1 vacancy, that's now been filled as well, and the employer relations team, that vacancy was filled by a member of our pension board. So I think that's all really good news. And I think, as I commented this morning at the committee, we have recruited additional posts, because I know recruitment is an issue countrywide, just not here in Lincolnshire or West Yorkshire. And I know we have 211 full-time employees. I believe that was about 196 when I started 2 years ago. So we are looking to up-resource all the time. Looking at the budget, I won't go into detail on the budget, but we are on track. The costs remain at £18.58 per head per member. And just looking at some of the breakdown, there are some underspends, although I would point out that the underspend for employees is because we haven't had all the posts filled. And there are some overspends in there. It hasn't affected the overall cost, but largely I would suggest that this is to the cost of living crisis, and we will keep monitoring this, and we will be bringing it back to Collaboration Board and informing you of any changes. The risk register, where we highlighted that risk number 2 probably needs an amendment, and that would go hand in hand with the policy change and the shared service refresh, which we had a meeting in September and drafted a refresh of the agreement. That has been slowed because of Bradford's legal services, to the extent that we've now sought independent legal advice. Those legal advisors have a few questions. It will be discussed at the shared service meeting next week, and then there's likely to be a meeting between the shared service partners and that legal advisor, so we hope to move that on quickly going forward. Pension dashboard, not much to report on pension dashboard, except we are ahead of schedule. The deadline is October 26. We are expected to stage by September 2025, although that has not been formally communicated yet. But we expect to be looking at putting data on the dashboard probably in the spring, maybe even April time, because we need to get the data on, make sure that it is proficient, efficient, is correct, there's no errors. It's going to take us six months probably to make sure that it's working well. Regulatory update, very short in this on the regulatory update, but it's just to draw your attention to lifetime allowance has now been removed due to the Finance Bill 23-24. That seems like good news, but it doesn't quite sit well with our regs. And as you can see from the report, there's three examples of concerns. We feel that we've got a good understanding, but we are waiting for the Local Government Association to provide some guidance. And where we take some opportunity, we may have a bit of training coming soon from someone sitting in the room, so which will just reassure us that we do know our stuff and we can deliver this. That's the report. Any questions?
The scheme manager. Am I right to ask a question as the scheme manager? You just mentioned the shared service agreement there, Matt. I know I've been getting some earache because our legal services haven't seen it yet.
Yeah,
we started work on this a year ago, last year sometime. What do we do? Because it's the 21st of March. This current agreement ends on the 31st of March. Our team haven't seen it at all yet.
Yeah.
What's the plan? Because I'm guessing we're not likely to have something in place by the end of. Well, it's Easter next Friday.
It
so
won't be.
Friday.
It won't be in place
No.
because it's got bogged down in Bradford's legal. For whatever reasons, I don't know. I genuinely don't know because I drafted the refresh 6 to 8 weeks after we met, and I haven't seen it since. So that's that. So I know it has been bogged down in Bradford. I know there is also an extension in the pipeline that I spoke about or spoke to this morning about that, and I've chased up the assistant director to, if you like, just read that and make sure that that is acceptable to West Yorkshire Pension Fund and get that back to Joe so that we can get that signed next week and get an extension put in place for 3 months, giving us time to either get this through Bradford Legal Services or get the agreement through the independent advisor that we've now employed. And that will be part of the conversation next week at the shared service meeting and that proposed meeting with that legal advisor.
And if I can just add, it's not been for want of trying, been chasing this constantly. But I will say our legal team turned around a really quick variation agreement for me last week when I'd got to the point where I was having sleepless nights about worrying what was going to happen from the 1st of April. So yes, that did go off on Tuesday morning, first thing, to West Yorkshire, so hopefully with a prod from Matt, get agreement that will be acceptable. It's a very simple agreement. I can't see anything that they could take offence to. That then has to be sealed here and then sent back to West Yorkshire to be sealed by Bradford. So I think cutting it fine is probably the terminology to use, but we will ensure that it is done, even if I have to take a drive up to, or a train across to Bradford from Leeds on Tuesday when I go up for the Border to Coast meeting. But it has been incredibly disappointing, the time this has taken and the difficulties to get something in place. So I've made my views well heard with Ewan and with Eunice about this. It doesn't seem that Bradford Legal are busy is an acceptable reason for it taking this long. So Matt hasn't particularly been involved in this side of it, but is now on the case to push as well. So just an update on that.
Just to confirm, yeah, I did speak to the assistant director this morning, and he was looking at it today. But obviously we've been in meetings, so I don't know where it's gone after that. No, okay.
Can we get an update at the future? Obviously, you've just given yourself 3 months there to.
The variation agreement itself doesn't actually have an end date on it. I'd suggested to legal 3 months. They'd said 3 to 6 months. We need it done by, well, in June, Hounslow, who are another of the shared service partners, their agreement comes to an end. So it would make sense to have got it done by then. And now that Eversheds have got involved, we're going to hopefully set up this meeting that Matt's spoken about. And I have a lot more confidence that Eversheds will get it through in a much speedier way than it's taken so far. But obviously they just need to fully understand the background. And then they'll be able to draft something that all four shared service partners, including West Yorkshire, can agree to. That will, you know, the idea was that we future-proof this as well, so it's not something that has to be looked at in a couple of years again. But I will keep everyone informed once that's done. Hopefully by the end of next week we will have the variation agreement sorted, because otherwise they'll have no legal duty to hold our data as of 1st of April and do our admin service, which is sleepless nights.
Should you or Andrew write to you and Miller about this, or is that all formally?
Can do.
Well, I don't know. I'm merely asking you.
I mean,
what can we do to help you? Is my question, I guess.
I suppose that moment might have passed, to be quite honest. I think we've got a solution now in terms of the legal team that have been engaged. It's just unfortunate that didn't happen quicker, I think. And I say, Joe, I've been copied into the messages to you and you, so.
And it was raised at the collaboration board, the last one of those, which was a couple of months ago, weeks ago, so it has been raised to the, you know, and Ewan is the managing director of West Yorkshire Pension Fund, and I spoke to him at the PLSA local authority committee meeting that I was at a couple of weeks ago about it as well. So, you know, we've raised it, and as I say, it's very unfortunate that it's got to this late in the day and we haven't got anywhere. But as I say, our legal have turned it around really quickly to get a variation agreement in place. So we now just need the same response from West Yorkshire to at least give us that breathing space to get a new agreement that's fit for purpose.
Okay, thank you. Anything?
Could I just ask a question, please? Just on the member contacts,
Yeah.
I just wondered if you had any idea of response rates from other funds, or if this was something that could be discussed at the pension officer groups to see if there's anything where people are more successful in getting responses back, and just see if there's some kind of different practice out there that might help.
Yeah.
Just as an idea.
Yeah.
David?
May I just ask, Matt, just taking you back now to your KPIs.
Yeah.
Fully understand the reasons why you've prioritised. Just for my clarification, do you still send out to members what I used to call a statutory notification that they've been admitted to the scheme on a date?
Yes.
And then would you normally follow on that if you added some like further service from a transfer, send them confirmation?
Yes.
So the question is really, if the inter-fund linking hasn't happened, and it's one of the lowest, and I do understand why, are they aware, are the membership aware that there is a delay? Do they know they're a member and joined the scheme?
Well, yes, because the linkings don't occur on day one. That's the crucial bit. I mean, they used to be so much simpler back in the day, but because of the way the regulations are drafted, an interlinking may not occur for 12 months until the 12 months has expired, because it doesn't necessarily need a signature these days to link. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It depends on the age of the membership that's being linked and the break in between, and whether it's pre-14 or post-14. So it's all quite technical now. So there will be occasions where people have indicated, having received a welcome to the letter fund, that they want it to be linked. Yep, that's clear. And then there'll be other, they've had the letter from the fund, and depending on them, they don't need to make any indication they want it to be linked. In fact, it's the other way around. They'll have to indicate they don't. So that 12-month period is quite confusing from the outset. But when we do comply with their requests, we would then communicate it with them. And we have put quite a bit of information out, describing the pause in processing due to these factors. And I know it was raised this morning, but we've been through the IDRPs. We are not getting complaints regarding this at the moment. We may be getting some questions and people might be asking, which is quite relevant, but nobody's saying that this is a serious issue, I'm losing out, I'm financially penalised because of any delays. We're not there. And I am making an assumption that people have challenged in so much as I haven't heard from you, because I would do the same thing.
The reason I'm asking only is I didn't want to think any of the members potentially could be disadvantaged through no fault of theirs, that at some point, well, you didn't notify, you didn't indicate, because they necessarily would know, would they?
No, they wouldn't necessarily know, to be honest, because of the way the regulations are. However, because it's a linking of LGPS benefits, it doesn't really matter if it happens on the first day of their career or on the last day of their career. The benefit values will be correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Matt, can I just ask you to look at Appendix C, please, the risk register?
Yes.
I guess I was a little surprised at number 1, C2, a rating for going out to tender. I would have thought you wouldn't. I'd have thought that needs to be green.
What number?
Well, it's number 1, risk number 1, and the rating is C2.
Oh, sorry, it's on the other side. Oh, that one. Yeah, sorry, I was looking at the summary.
I mean, I guess if I was Ewan, I would be wanting that to be green before I actually went out to tender again.
When we put this together, there was some discussions around what the rating would be. So it was my initial thoughts, and then we discussed it as the partnership.
Right.
And it was actually raised by one of the other partners that they felt that it was a risk because we could take on more business or people could leave the existing partnership. So even though there were no intentions for either, it was felt as a discussion that it would remain a risk.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I understand that. Over the page, number 4, failure to meet LGPS regulation overriding legislation.
Well, we'd like to be green, but there's so much going on at the moment. With the cloud remedy, the dashboard as well, removal of lifetime allowance, it was felt that maybe it's a more honest approach to say we need to learn as we do this, so that an amber risk would be better. Hence, as I mentioned earlier, there will be training where we feel as officers, the administrators, that we need it. If nothing changes for about 5 years, I think we could turn that green.
If I can just add to that, because obviously this is a joint risk register, so we've all had input into it. The other side of that is the concern over the software suppliers and their ability to have things ready. At the moment, there are manual processes having to be done because some of the software isn't there and hasn't kind of stepped up yet to be able to do things. So it's not just actually about the individuals in the admin team, it's also about the reliance of external bodies as well.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? No? Anything else?
No, not for me, thank you.
Right, the recommendation is the board discuss the activity and performance of the admin service during the last quarter, which we've done. You'll form you know how to phrase it, don't you, the recommendation? The minute, yeah? Any news on our absent member? Yeah, okay. Very good. Matt, item 6, temporary bank accounts.
Thank you, Chairman. Right, so this is the report regarding the creation and maintenance of temporary bank accounts. There are 2 reasons that we create temporary bank accounts for scheme members. One would be for pension or members retiring, benefits due for payment. and the other would be for refunds or in the entitlement for refunds. These generally are where we've lost contact with scheme members, or on the odd occasion they haven't provided their details, bank details, etc., for us to make a payment, or they've not made an election to receive the pension in the first place. With regards to the refunds, the current regulations state that the refund should be paid within 5 years, but of course it's very difficult if we've lost contact with them. So to discharge our liability, and to understand the liability as well, we create these bank accounts. Regarding the pensioner beneficiaries, in this period we have traced 3 members and had the benefits put into payment, which I don't think is too bad in this period, but it still remains 23 entitlements that are being paid into that bank account, and a value that's currently being held at £76,461. With regards to refunds, there are now 680 refunds due to be paid, which is, sounds terrible, doesn't it? For over £111,000. But I should add that this is probably more to do with poor drafting of our regulation rather than our membership. And these are small pots. The Scheme Advisory Board has requested a change to the regulations, so that there is no longer a requirement to make the payment in 5 years' time, or within 5 years. This has been stalled, largely because of McLeod and such like. I was at the technical group, the LGPS technical group in December, and they have raised this as a question to be put back to say, is this going to happen? Is this going to be considered anytime soon? Because it's a long-standing request. I don't think there's really much to add, except we do continue to trace these members regular when they hit trigger points. I think we brought it back to the last board, you know, when they're 60, state pension age, before they're 75. So we don't just pay it and give up. We continually trace these. So I'm optimistic there will be some more found, and particularly the pensioners, and these numbers will not escalate too much. Any questions?
Any questions?
Excuse me, Roger, sorry. Sorry, Matt.
That's
All I
right.
was going to ask really is the hope, or is the expectation that if the regulatory framework is changed,
Yeah.
and the 5-year deadline removed, is it going to be retrospective to say the 680 could be wiped off the schedule?
Well, wouldn't it be nice?
Yeah.
I really don't know. I wouldn't like to comment on that. I would just like to see a redrafting of the regulations. But I'll note your comment. I will be with the LGA next week. I might ask them that question.
Well, the only reason I ask that, I mean, if we've got 680, and that's 680 Lincolnshire,
Yeah.
I mean, West Yorkshire must have, gosh, I hate to think,
So let's say double, and then you add the other partners in, and he was quite
and
a
all the
number.
other funds. I mean, it's thousands of small refund pots
Yep.
backed up under a, shall we say, a strange regulatory requirement, isn't it?
Yeah.
I only ask in that it's a refund, isn't it? It's not
Well, it's a refund. And just to put a personal point to add, which I find quite peculiar, is we have the dashboard going live in the next 18 months. These are not included, because there's not an entitlement to a pension benefit. There's only an entitlement to a refund of contribution. Now, wouldn't it be great if this had been included? Because when people go on, they're going to be coming to us. You know, it might mean we've got more work to do. But in my mind, whether it's £500 or whatever it is, we can get it cleared, potentially. So, anyway.
I mean, all I was really saying is you're working, I mean, you're keeping a log of these.
Yeah.
They're there on, you know, they're there as work to do, which, albeit, you're still got to pay the refund at some point, but this 5-year thing seems to be sort of really no impact, is it?
Well, it has had an impact. We're creating bank accounts. I mean, it's a negative impact. It really hasn't helped us at all in the administration.
Can I just ask you to look at just Appendix A? And you know, this is one of my pets. I mean, let me say first of all, you are making progress, but I mean, there are 3 on there. You know, number 9, 4/12/20 case open. Tracing exercise started. Nearly £6 grand still outstanding.
Yep.
28/11, number 14, 28/11/22, 14, nearly 15k. No reply to claim form sent. And then, well, I suppose number 10, you've got some action there, haven't you? Death notification received.
Yeah.
Look, I don't expect you to be able to comment on those, Matt, but for me, that'd be the kind of the 3 that I'm targeting at the moment.
Yes, well, these are, well, how much more can we do? I mean,
Well, I just
tracing exercise started. That'd be interesting when I can find out where we are on that one, Chairman. That's not a problem. No reply to claim form sent. We're assuming on that basis that we know where this person lives. I think we've touched upon this. This is likely someone who doesn't want their pension because of perhaps other incomes they're receiving. It would affect that benefits. So we can't force people. And what was the other one that you said? Was it 20, did you say?
No,
Oh,
I
that's a
think
death.
number 10, you've got something received
10.
there.
Yeah, okay, so just those 2. If you don't mind, I'll take those away. I'll just make a few inquiries and drop you an email on those.
Yeah, I mean, that 15k one, number 14, I don't know whether that's worth a personal visit. But
Leave it with me. I'll see what we're doing. If that's all right.
yeah, I know, I hear what you've said about there might be in receipt of benefits and what have you, but, you know, you kind of look at that and think, do they understand what they're giving away and things like that?
I think one of the other issues that is a really positive thing that's done but can cause people not to respond is the concern over scams. Because we're going out, you know, it's on the television about someone sends you something saying, oh, you're owed some money, just give us your bank details. So I think that perhaps, whilst it's really helpful in some ways, is not then helpful in others, because I have had the odd phone call saying, I've received this, how do I know, you know, it's from who it says it is.
Right, if there's nothing else, a recommendation is board discuss the report, which we've done, considers whether they wish to take any further actions. Well, I think Matt's going to come back with a couple. So
Yeah,
thanks
mark
very
those
much.
on the file.
Okay.
I'll send an email.
Happy with that? Great. Lincoln Pension Fund Policies Review. It's you, Joe.
Microphones aren't playing nicely today. Thank you, Chairman. So this paper updates the board on any changes to the main policies of the fund. It's the annual review of the key policies covering the investment strategy statement, funding strategy statement, communications policy, pensions admin strategy, governance policy and compliance statement, breaches reporting policy, code of conduct and conflicts of interest policy, and the stewardship code statement. So amendments over the year have just been made to the one policy, the investment strategy statement, which is attached at Appendix A. This sets out the fund's approach to the investment of the fund's assets in accordance with the guidance issued by Secretary of State. This has been updated following changes agreed by the Pensions Committee to the strategic asset allocation, and information has been added to reflect the future requirements on reporting on assets pooled and transition plans. And the changes, the key changes to the policy are set out there. So updating the table of strategic asset allocation to reflect changes made last year, adding a table to show assets pooled with border to coast, and adding a table to show the transition plan that went to the January Pensions Committee and Pension Board to explain how pooling those assets that were not currently pooled. Other policies haven't been amended, but there is a link to all those policies included in paragraph 4. So I would be happy to walk through the ISS if the board would like. Otherwise, I will be happy to just answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Are there any questions? No?
No.
I thought it was an excellent document, so nothing from me.
No.
So we're asked to discuss and consider the reports in the fund's updated investment strategy statement. No? Okay. Thank you. Then on to the business plan item 8, Joe.
Yeah, thank you. So this is the annual business plan for your consideration. The plan is attached to Appendix A and sets out the objectives of the fund, some statistics on the funding level and cash flow, the resources and the budget that we have, the key tasks for the year ahead, with a look back at progression on those that we set last year, the key risks for the fund, and a forward plan of expected meetings. A lot of work has been done over the last year, and generally progress on key tasks has been good. Where tasks haven't progressed as we would have hoped, that's been due to either resourcing issues or factors outside of the control of the team, such as awaiting DLUC or SAB guidance. We've added 2 new tasks for 24-25. The appointment of the new independent chair of the local board and supporting them in their new role, and ensuring compliance with TPR's new General Code of Practice. Custody tender we postponed from last year, that will be undertaken this summer to begin 1st of April next year. And updates and outcomes from all of these will be brought to the board for their consideration as required. The forward plan, as the last item, sets out the expected agenda meetings for the coming year, but it is flexible and additional papers or training will be added as required. So I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions? I've got one to ask you, Joe, and probably I shouldn't. Are you happy with the new arrangements for the meetings of the pensions committee? So, you know, where, like this morning, admin, we've got admin and what have you this afternoon, and then they've got 2 investment committees, haven't they, in April and June.
So there's 4 investment and responsible investment meetings, 4 administration and governance meetings, and 4 board meetings. So personally, whilst it feels that report writing is a constant merry-go-round, I do feel it works better. The meetings are shorter, but the time is there should they wish to ask more questions. I think trying to, we were having agendas that were 15 or more items long, and trying to get through them and ensure that there was adequate time for any discussion or questions or clarification was proving very difficult. I think there's only one way that our agenda items are going to go, and that's that there's going to be more of them. So the hope is, from the officer side, is that this is enabling the committee to spend more time on those areas that they need to. And it seemed an easy split to separate out the admin and governance to the investments, because all too often in committees in the past, the investments side has taken over most of the time, and we felt it was important that both aspects of managing the pension fund had equal time to be considered by the committee. I haven't had any negative feedback from members as yet, so we've been doing this for nearly a year now. But yeah, personally as officers, I think we feel it does work better. And sorry, yes, the other point that I'm just being reminded is it does give us that ability to have a training aspect at every meeting. And the issue before we had with training was when it was just a full training meeting, committee members might not necessarily prioritise that as much as coming to a committee meeting, and then we tag the training on to the end. So that was another reason behind trying to integrate the training into each meeting and ensure we'd got enough of a range of training across all aspects of managing the fund. But I'd be happy to take any feedback from observers of having gone to those meetings.
Well, Thomas, don't minute this, but I just felt that the input from the pensions committee this morning was pretty low, not very good. I just got the impression that they just got no interest in what I'd call almost the engine room of the pension scheme, and I just found it disappointing, really.
There's a couple of people missing this morning, wasn't there?
Yeah, I regularly share that disappointment. And I think as officers, all we can try and do is ensure that we are providing them with the information that they need, There is a hope that some of the regulations and guidance and things, when they come through, will give us the ability to encourage members to participate more or attend more. I know it's not just an issue with our committee. There are some funds where the committees are all really engaged, but sometimes discussion does go down routes that perhaps it shouldn't. We did have members missing today that may have been more vocal and are perhaps more often more vocal. But yeah, it is always disappointing as officers when we've done all the papers and there are no questions. But I do believe the format we have now gives the opportunity for it, but quite how we get them to engage and ask more questions, we're always open to ideas as to how we can encourage that engagement more.
I've got views on this, but I better write you a paper on it.
It's probably worth saying that we have a similar thing at Audit Committee with the accounts and things, where they're maybe like a bit more of the engine room. I think, this isn't about being complacent, but we're in a good place in terms of our governance and things like that. So it's the least sexy bit, I suppose, is what we've kind of said, isn't it? It's I think when things are working well, and I'm sure Rash will say at Audit Committee, we don't generate a lot of questions because the reports are good. We seem to be on top of things. I suppose what they don't need to be is complacent then in those scenarios, and ask the questions about the things that are coming up and the changes. But we do see a bit of that in the Audit Committee as well, where things seem to be working well and governance is working well. So obviously more discussion probably around the investment meetings, which is usual, I suppose. Just an observation from me. So,
well, I mean, just a final comment. I just think that you've got a £3.25 billion pension fund, and I just think that some of the members just do not understand the responsibilities that are attached to them and what you do as a team. I really do not, and pension's a long time, and you kind of think, don't understand it. But anyway, there we are.
Sorry. Excuse me, Roger. I'm just going to pick up on the fund value, 3.25 billion. Sorry. I wasn't at the last board meeting, and I noticed that the funding levels dropped below 100%. Well, it was in excess of when I last looked, if I may say. And is it because we've had a change? I mean, I thought we set an actuarial assessment, we set it for 3 years, so we know what it is, and we come 3 years on, we start again, if you like, and we go through that. But it looks as though we've changed the mechanism partway through the year, or the triennial period. I just wondered, could you just explain, sorry Joe, what has happened, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is normally quite static, but there have been some things that have been happening that have been unusual over the past few years. So I think that actuaries are now reflecting on their models more regularly than just at every triennial valuation. So the first change, which went to the July committee, was that the expected returns, because of the way yields had moved, etc., the expected returns from the absolute return element of the portfolio was looking greater than the expected return of the equity side. Now, in normal investment markets, equities are always expected to return more over the longer term. So it was a bit of an anomaly. So the expected return calculation on the absolute returns was amended to make it more prudent, given what had been happening in markets. So that took 5% off the funding level. Following that, and I think that took us down to about 100%, because we'd been at about 105, 6. So following that, the actuary had had a lot of contact from auditors about the inflation. So within the valuation, the inflation is the assumed long-term value that's put into there. Now, the pushback from auditors was actually you should take account of known inflation that's happened. So we know we've had inflation at 10%. How is that reflected? So the actuary looked at that, and I don't know if other actuarial firms have done this, but Barnett Waddingham decided that they should actually look at known inflation as part of that update of the funding model and rolling it forward each time. That itself then knocked off quite a few more percentage points, because obviously inflation was far higher, the known inflation was far higher than the expected long-term inflation. So that's brought us down to kind of the 94% that was reported at January committee. Too many committees. January committee. So as far as I'm aware, there are no more changes to be made to the funding model, but I can't say there won't be, because actually what we do want is a model that is reactive to changes in the market environment, not changing to absolutely everything, but if there is something that is stand out, we don't want to necessarily wait 3 years. Now, this hasn't impacted the underlying rates that our employers are paying. That hasn't changed. Their valuation position as at 31st of March 22 is still the same, but what it does impact are things like cessation valuations. So we have had where some employers thought they would be going out with quite a large surplus, have now found out that they're just either fully funded or now have a deficit. But I do think it is more reflective of what's actually happened. So at the end of the day, we need these assets and liabilities to match. So we want them, particularly when there's a crystallisation event such as a cessation, we want them to be as accurate as we can be on a model that's assumption on assumption. So yeah, the fund has done what the fund's done in the investment markets, and investment returns have been lower than those assumed in the valuation. That hasn't impacted the model, though. That is just an outcome that will feed through, and we might have a great year this year that will bring us over that average over the 3 years. But it is just changes in the funding model. Now, these changes weren't just put upon us, they were discussed, spoken about. Did they make sense? Did we want them applied, and from when? So we've have that ongoing discussion with the actuary to make sure that we're still content that the valuation modelling is, or the funding model is the best it can be, given that it is all about assumptions.
If I just think it through, Joe, and I'm just mulling this over, we've lost in the funding level about 12%. It's gone down from 106 to 94. So with 12%, there's a 12% difference. The valuation, the next valuation, is, when is it, 2025? If we're still here at that point, that we're still at 95% funded, I know it's an if, how will that impact on the employer contributions then, at that point? Will that, what I'm thinking is that we've had in the 3-year period, triennial period, we set the rates for the employers. They were quite content, well, they signed it all off, didn't they? We moved it, and then we're going to potentially say, well, actually, we weren't quite where we thought we were. And all we've done is change the model, or change the assumptions. Is that fair comment? Or am I missing something?
No, you're not missing anything. But obviously, all the assumptions are reassessed every 3 years anyway. So based on what has happened over the past 3 years, what each underlying employer has done over the last 3 years. So just because the overall fund level has fallen, every employer obviously has their own notional fund. So depending on what they've done, depending on their membership profiles, theirs will be separate to that. But the expectation is potentially that, yes, well, there definitely will be a different rate. Yeah. But without being able to crystal ball gaze, it's very hard to say how that will be. One of the things we had at the last valuation was actually the future cost. So the primary rate, the cost of accruing those pensions on a day-to-day basis, increased quite considerably. because of the inflation expectations, etc. So, you know, you get 10%, you get another 7%, whatever, on your pension costs, those liabilities will go up quite considerably. And on all your increases in your deferred and your actives on the career average side. So the rates will change. We will do what we always do, which is have meetings with our employers, bring the actuary in to explain it, and do all we can to ensure that the rates remain as stable as possible. So there are a number of different levers that can be used at evaluation. It might be that the future growth level might increase. We were quite prudent in our expected, so our discount rate, as it's called, our future investment return. I think we were definitely at the lower end of the LGPS at 4%. I think the average was about 5 or something. So actually increasing that slightly will change and will improve the funding position because expected to make more money going forward. So discounted back, that puts in a better position. So there are so many different levers. It's on the most logical thing at the moment is exactly what you're saying, that, well, if we've changed this, funding levels across the whole have dropped, they're going to have to pay more. But there's so many other moving parts in that, and when we will reassess the assumptions, that it's not necessarily the case. So I can't say any more than that because it's kind of crystal ball gazing, but
I was asking purely because if I was an employer in the scheme and we were looking at these, I would think it was. It's a bit, you know, it's a little, I know there are, don't get me wrong, there's always a reason, but it was, I hadn't realised that the funding level had reduced until I was reading this. I mean, it's pension fund stats I was reading in the report you've just done, and the projection of the funding levels. So I understand. I couldn't understand why we didn't wait until 2025. That was my issue.
yeah, and again, that was a discussion whether or not we do it, but as I say, there was a lot of pressure from auditors as to that it didn't seem right not to include known inflation. So I don't, as I say, I don't know whether other actuarial firms, I'm assuming they've had the same discussions, but I don't know whether any of those have followed through with changes. So
it was a consistent question that we were raising across a number of audited entities. I don't know the profile offhand in terms of which actuaries were maybe further behind in terms of applying that assumption, but it was a consistent question that came up probably about a year ago now, possibly 18 months ago, that we were asking as we were auditing a number of stats.
So essentially, Joe, I mean, basically what the actuary was saying was that the liabilities are going to be greater than what they'd forecast because of the pensions increase, by and large. But did you take into account any reduction in longevity, you know, because the mortality tables are kind of going the other way?
there haven't been changes to it in the interim on that, but that will be looked at again at the next valuation. That does just tend to be, because longevity is such a long-term thing, that will be included as always as part of the next valuation cycle.
Okay, that's quite very interesting. That. Right, any other questions on the business plan? If not, recommendation is Pension Board consider and discuss the Lincolnshire Pension Fund business plan. Well, we've done that. Okay. Annual report and accounts.
Thank you. So the report covers the preparation of the Pension Fund annual report and accounts, plus the timings for the year ended 31st of March 2024. The report also brings the indicative plan from the fund's new external auditor KPMG for this year, and allows for first introductions for the board to the auditor. There are two key dates for publishing pension fund annual reports and accounts information. So the annual report should be published by the 1st of December, and the pension fund accounts combined with the county council's accounts must be published in draft for public inspection by the 31st of March. No, by the 31st of May. I'm nearly there, don't worry.
You can't be worried then.
They've got precisely 5 days.
It won't be a problem. We don't anticipate any issues in achieving these deadlines once I've set the right dates. And we will be bringing the draft annual report to the board meeting in July for your consideration. The guidance used to prepare annual reports is currently being reviewed and should be available very shortly. And this will apply for 2024-25 with best endeavours for 23-24. Once the guidance has been received, it will be reviewed by the fund and applied for this year wherever possible and appropriate, and in full for the following financial year. In terms of preparation of the accounts, there aren't any changes to accounting standards or guidance set out in the Code of Practice for pension funds, so you should expect the accounts and the accounting policies for 23-24 to be largely the same as was seen for 22-23. For this financial year, KPMG have been appointed as the fund's external auditor, and work on the pension fund audit has begun in February of this year. A copy of their indicative plan is attached to Appendix B, and Rashpal, the partner from KPMG, is here to introduce himself, the firm, explain their audit plan and answer any of your questions. I'm very happy to take any questions on the report, if there are any, and then I'll hand over to Rashpal.
Any questions? Any questions, first of all? No. Over to you, Rash. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So, as has been mentioned, this is an indicative plan. I'm firstly very pleased to bring this here because it's the first of the reports we bring in from our current appointment as your external auditors. The sector has been experiencing some significant delays and issues, and there's a couple of, there's 3 consultations out, 2 of which will possibly, varying degrees of impact on yourself as a pension fund. But, you know, the DLUC consultation on backlog, the NAO consultation on the audit code, and the SIPFA consultation on the Code of Accounting Practice, although that will not have that significant impact on you. We're waiting for that to be finalised, and we're also waiting for our file review of the outgoing auditor, Mazars, to be complete, which is scheduled for next week. And then we'll complete our planning and risk assessment work during the month of April, produce a full draft plan for officers, and that'll be coming back to your next meeting, which I believe is in July. However, I didn't want to lose the opportunity we got here to talk through some of the considerations we make when we think about audit planning, because we can't just turn up and produce an audit plan. You've got to do a certain amount of work as per the ICES, and you know, we started that work. We started, as Claire will probably have seen and witnessed, the walkthrough processes to understand the processes and be able to find process risk points and then identify where the risk and material misstatements lie. On page 117 of the pack, we've just spelt out on a page some of those key considerations. Materiality, we don't audit to the penny, would be here a very long time. Your fees would certainly be a lot larger if we did audit to the penny. We have a headline materiality level. We then design procedures at a lower level because there's the risk of aggregation risk, and of course we report issues that we identify at a lower level to yourselves. We've identified key risks. The first 2 risks there are really around the standard risks, management override of controls, which all audits, that's a risk that all audits have to have. There's no specific areas we need to bring to your attention here as any specific risk factors at the pension fund. Contributions, so that's akin to revenue recognition. It is a rebuttable presumption, and because of the nature of contributions you receive and the relatively simple recognition criteria, we're not presuming that as a significant risk. Clearly, we do a lot of work around investments. The other one that I do want to flag up there that is slightly different, a 1-year entry, is general ledger migration. The council moved to a new general ledger platform 1st of April 23. There's a risk that the closing balances on the old ledger didn't transfer appropriately or accurately or completely, so we undertake a series of work around that to make sure there's no issues in terms of that transfer process. The rest of the document outlines our audit fees on page 118. Those have increased. Those are but in line with the PSA's fees consultation, which was made last autumn. to all relevant audits. It does reflect the increased cost that's come through the recent procurement process, which in turn reflects the increased level of work auditors are expected through various different ISAs. And finally, on page 119, we confirm our independence. We're required to be independent as per a series of regulations, including the code and, importantly, ethical standards. And I'm happy to confirm we are independent and there's no other fee relationships I need to draw to your attention, or any other relationships we have as a firm, as a business, on a business perspective, or as individuals undertaking your audit. Happy to take any questions through you, Chairman.
Any questions? Claire?
Yeah, can I just ask a question about the materiality? So the testing materiality that you have set, and I appreciate you are a different organisation to Mazars, but do you expect that testing materiality to come down in future years? So do you set it at a, I think it's a lower level, right? I should think maybe the other way around. So do you set a lower threshold for that in a first year audit than you will in future years? So should we expect there to be more work done in this first year other than your setup on the audit?
So in terms of the standard on materiality, the headline materiality we based at approximately 1% of total assets, and in the absence of further changes to guidance and regulations, I suspect that will remain the case. The second level of materiality, the one where we design procedures to detect individual errors, at 19.8 million, we do set that on a percentage of the base materiality, and what we factor in there is prior experience. So absolutely, if we can see a stable control environment, stability in terms of officers putting together the financial statements, and no significant issues coming out of our first year audit, there was likely to be movement on that level of materiality. The firm's approach is 75% where there's no issues, and you've got that assurance from the past, 65% where you've got, I'm going to use the phrase concerns or some uncertainties, and then 55%, which is probably because we've identified significant issues in the prior year, or there's been a significant changes in how you put those accounts and the control environment that puts those accounts together.
David?
No, that's fine.
Oh. No?
I was just going to mention that Rash is also covering the LCC side, so where we've had two partners with Mazars, one separate for pensions and one for LCC, that has caused us problems. Rash is overseeing both. So.
Yes, I'm overseeing both, so hopefully I'll be able to tell what the left-hand side of the brain is saying to the right-hand side.
Well, that's good news. I look forward to the July meeting. I'm sure it's got to be an improvement in the...
I think this year's still going to be a challenge, not necessarily around the pension side, but with LCC, particularly around the checks that you need to do around the ledger, which obviously will impact on the pension fund as well. But this is our first year closing down on our new Business World platform, and obviously answering the questions. And we need to line our work up with the plan timetable that KPMG have got to make sure we don't stray into their other work to put us back at all. So I think it's going to be a challenge, we know that, but hopefully we've lined everything up as we can do. And as I say, Rash overseeing both sides is helpful.
Yeah, no, so we absolutely, in terms of operationally, it's about regular communications to make sure we know when we're doing the work, and, nobody's storing up any surprises for each other, very much, if we've got an issue, we put a hand up, and, one of the discussions I've had with officers is the same from the officers' side, everybody's got my mobile number. Yes, yeah.
I've got Rash's.
Well, I'm delighted that KPMG are back. As simple as that. And thank you very much for coming today and for your presentation. And well, I've only got 3 months left to work with you, but look forward to getting an update in July. In terms of the recommendations, board discuss and consider the changes required to the annual report, statement of accounts, which we've done, statement of accounting policies, etc., for use in preparing a local pension scheme. Noted those, and the update from KPMG. Okay, happy with those? Yep. So item 10, I think I'm responsible for this, the IDRB procedure.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, you are responsible. You requested this at the last meeting. So, internal dispute resolution procedure, this report is sort of an overview, so I should try and summarise this story, if you like, because we've walked through the process. We've already discussed IDRPs, and there are 2 stages, but it actually sits within perhaps a 3-step process. First of all, a decision has to be made, or not made, that affects the members' benefits, their entitlement, or at least that's how they feel. And then what we would expect in step 2 is they've approached the decision maker and say, I don't understand, I'm not happy, I don't agree. At that point, this is still informal. I would have expected the decision maker to informally look at their process, make sure that their house is in order, that they have followed their internal process and policy, and they've adhered to scheme regulations. Having done that, and confident they've done that, then they would tell the scheme member that actually I don't think there is anything to answer. However, the scheme member might still not be happy with that, and then would invoke IDRP stage 1. Now, depending on who made that decision would be depending on who would oversee this, because if it was an administering authority, the complaint would be against previous service. It might be against the award of additional benefits or the actual application of the scheme regulations. On the other hand, the member might be challenging an employer about pensionable pay, the figure that we actually use in the calculation as an administrator. So depending on what that complaint is about, depending on where it goes for this process. What it's likely to do, though, if it's against the employer, they should actually investigate at stage 1. They should have an adjudicator to investigate this complaint formally. And they should not have had any bearing or decision-making or anything to do at all with this case. So they are independent, which I know, Chairman, is one of the issues you have with the LGPS. But they are independent to the case, even though they're not independent to the employer or the scheme. Once they've made that determination and the member is still not happy, it could go to stage 2, and it would be the assistant director at West Yorkshire Pension Fund that would look after that. Again, the assistant director cannot have had anything to do with the case, so they are independent. However, if it's against the administrative authority, then the decision for the adjudication for stage 1 would go to the head of pensions, which is Jo, and she will make an adjudication to the member, and if they're not happy, they can invoke stage 2, and they can then come back to the assistant director. In both cases, Jo and the assistant director cannot have anything to do with this case. So again, it's independence. Now, there is some criteria around how we look at these cases. So first of all, we need to check the date when the original decision was made, because the members should make their official appeal within 6 months. I don't know how hard line we take on this, Jo. I have to say, I forgot to ask Eunice that, but I would be a little bit flexible on that. If someone came back after 7 or 8 months, I would probably still look at the case. It stands us in good stead if it goes to the Pensions Ombudsman, because we have retained an open mind and we have looked at our internal processes. However, 6 months is in the regulations, and once we've conducted our investigation, we should confirm our decision with the member within a 2-month period. If we cannot do that, we should contact the member. We should let them know we're not going to make that 2-month date and give them an expectation of when we are likely to achieve that goal, so a further month or 2 months. So we would look at the scheme regulations, all right? We're not looking about outside of the scheme regulations, we're not looking at maladministration, and the adjudicator cannot make an award for compensation. It's strictly looking at that decision under the LGPS regulations at the time, in force at the time the decision was made. And then when they contact the scheme member, they would tell them the outcome of the determination, the evidence that was received and considered, basically present a case to them. And of course, if they're not happy with the outcome, they will go to stage 2. Now, in stage 2, we still have 2 months to respond, and if we can't respond in 2 months because we're looking for more information or whatever, then we let them know, and the expected time that we would deliver the determination. And it's very similar. It's the same criteria that's looked at, the original process, the original determination in stage 1, and any other new information that may have been presented. There is a slight difference, though, in what we can do at stage 2, or what the adjudicator can do at stage 2. Because as an administering authority, we can now award compensation. It's relatively new. It's for things like non-financial hardship, and there might be a range of, say, £500 to £2,000, depending on how much distress and inconvenience have been caused. But of course, that would assume that there is something wrong with the process or the outcome or the decision that was made. What they cannot do again, though, is they cannot make a decision, like re-rule and say, oh, the decision is wrong, it should have been like this. What the adjudicator can do is simply say to the employer or the administrative authority, please look at this again. This is what hasn't been considered. This is what we considered wrong with the process. You know, for example, if there was an ill health, an IDRP about an ill health retirement, they could consider that the member be reassessed by an IRMP, a different one for a different opinion. They must be impartial. So again, that independence, they must have nothing to do with this case. And when they present their case, again, it's all the information they've assessed under the regulations and any new information that's been provided. Generally, as we've seen in our other reports, there are a few IDRPs here at Lincolnshire, and the ones that do come through are not upheld. There could be, there will be cases. And there are cases where perhaps there's a partial upheld. For example, maybe back to an ill health, a member may have complained that they felt they meet the criteria for ill health, but they were determined that they weren't, and they felt that what affected that decision is they wasn't assessed face-to-face by the medical professional. So we can actually turn the appeal down on that aspect because there isn't anything in the regulations that demands the medical practitioner needs to meet face-to-face with the scheme member. However, we could still find some inconsistencies or something wrong with the process and the final decision, so we can ask for that to be reviewed. So you can see it would be partially upheld. If we don't uphold the appeal, the scheme member can move to TPAS, the Pension Advisory Service, and or the Pension Ombudsman, who may take up their case, and then they will look at all the evidence that has been presented to the two adjudicators previously. The only other thing I would add is the role of the independent registered medical practitioner. I've mentioned them several times because that's where most of our complaints, our IDRPs seem to be. It's important to remember, and our employers don't always understand this and our members don't, that the medical practitioner for an ill health appeal does not make the decision. Not in the appeal, not in the actual retirement of somebody claiming a medical retirement or an ill health retirement. Their role in this is to assess whether the scheme member meets the criteria of the scheme regulations and offer a professional and impartial decision or opinion. So even I get it wrong. It's opinion. It's an opinion that they offer. What then happens is the employer assesses that medical opinion, it assesses the facts of their case, and then it would be the employer that dismisses the member on the grounds of ill health. And that's not a very popular word at the moment, but an ill health retirement is a dismissal because the employer has removed the contract of employment or terminated that contract. So on appeal, it needs to be made sure that the member understands that the appeal is against the employer, and that any review regarding a medical or the information required is assessed by another independent medical practitioner. It should also be noted, and I think we've had a case here, that the member has to provide consent for those medical records to be accessed, and I think we had a case where they wouldn't provide it, so that was not upheld immediately. And I think that is a summary of that report. Any questions?
Any questions?
Is it on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, couldn't see. All I was going to ask, Matt, is Lincolnshire pension fund has got, what, 200 plus employers? So at the first instant, the first stage decision is with one of those. So it could be Lincolnshire County Council as the employer, or it could be any one of the others. Is part of the issue at times that you've got to find someone at the employer who is, if not independent, at least know what they're doing? Because I'm thinking more about you're pushing it back to the scheme employer. Do you have a name? There is somebody at the employer, each employer, who takes that role on? Or do you just, I'm just wondering what the procedure is. Do you just throw it back and say that someone's appealed, come back with this information?
I think they should, in practice, or in theory, they should have somebody who's named as an adjudicator, but I think in practice, and not just in Lincolnshire, across the country, in practice I don't think that happens. And the reasons, and not from here, but when I was involved in these sort of cases, the administrator more often than not would contact the employer and say it's your responsibility, and they would be going, no, it's not, we've got nothing more to do with this, it's down to you. And we go, well, actually no, you made the decision, please review your processes. It's a little bit of a head in the sand scenario, because I find that the employers, when they hear of complaint, IDRP, formality, they become quite scared. Well, I would encourage them to look at it the other way round, and this is an opportunity to actually demonstrate to yourself that you followed your internal processes, policies and the scheme regulations and all the other laws that go with it, so that you are comfortable and confident that you're in a good place. Because once they've done that, the responsibility is removed from them, because it would arguably then go to a stage 2, wouldn't it? And it's back to the administering authority.
Sorry,
I was just trying to think whether there's anything on the contacts form that says who is responsible, but I don't think there is. But what I was going to say is that there is training that is available through West Yorkshire on IDRP specifically, and it's an area that they do look at and discuss with employers, because it kind of also sits a bit alongside the discretionary policies work that gets done as well, because if they've got their discretionary policies nailed down as well, that can also help in an IDRP and some of the decisions that they're making. So there is a lot of work that's done with employers to ensure that they understand their responsibilities around IDRP.
Excuse me, Matt, I've got one further question. This is purely going back. If we look back at your report, there's there's the Pensions Ombudsman case that is now 2 years. Is there a time limit then when we get to the Pensions Ombudsman? Because this one's about the reason for leaving, isn't it? It's been on for some while.
That's right. And I don't think they do have a maximum or upper time limit or date. And I think the time it's taking the Ombudsman to deal with these cases has been compounded by their cyber attack. I did think it was about an 18-month waiting list. Well, I think it's now might be 2.5 years now, I think.
The only reason I ask again is that from the member's perspective, this member must be thinking, well, is it ever going to be resolved? You know, we're 2 years in and I'm still waiting for this to be answered.
I think it could be incredibly frustrating. I mean, for officers as well, and administrative authorities, we've done everything that we can, and we've done it in a good time. We've done it in 2 months each time. We may have considered something that was out of date as well. We've bent over backwards. We've proved our independence, our process, and we're happy with everything. However, the member will come to us if the Pension Ombudsman doesn't respond, and it doesn't make us look good either, I have to say.
But no, I agree. I mean, there are all sorts of problems at the Pensions Ombudsman. I guess my one question, Matt, and you'll probably tell me to run away, but I just question, and always have done, why the assistant director is the kind of independent reviewer at West Yorkshire. certainly my experience on the other side in the private sector is
Yep.
that any IDRP goes to either the full trustee board or at least a subcommittee of the trustee board.
Yep.
And I guess that is my one concern about our process. But if that is what happens elsewhere, then
It is. So with the board, with this board, you're a non-decision making board. So as under the legislation, you couldn't make a decision on this. If they change the legislation, we might be in a different place. But currently, that doesn't work. As for the assistant director, well, he's no longer an administrator. He doesn't see these cases unless they're put in front of him. So he ticks that independence box. I think the thought really is, well, if we're not using the director, do we use the director? Do we use the director of Lincolnshire or whatever? But we become removed then from the fund. And it's very difficult to find anybody that understands the LGPS to actually make an adjudication. I mean, in my 20 odd years in the LGPS, I can think of one chap from Suffolk who used to be completely independent and take on several funds' work. He was a retired officer. For the life of me, I can't think of his name. But he retired in 2008. And since then, the funds have been struggling to find, certainly the funds I've been dealing with, anyone that's fully independent with the knowledge. So I think that's why it's still with the director. I mean, it might not stay with the director. I mean, I have sort of said to him, it could be me. It could be you. It could be anybody. I don't know.
it's certainly not the role of the Pensions Board, although some London boroughs push it that way. I mean, has it always operated like that? Looking at
What's always what in the
IDRP 2, second stage. So what used to happen when it was when pensions admin was in-house?
Well, going back that far, it was often it often fell in legal. Legal used to do it. One of the legal team used to be the appointed stage 2 and would take it on purely because I think it was a regulatory type role, and so there was a named member of the legal team who sort of got involved. But it often, when I say that, I can remember at one point David Stubbs. Can you remember David? He took on a big case of second stage appeal that eventually went to the Ombudsman. But that was but yeah, legal used to do it.
And it was legal until we moved to West Yorkshire. The issue we had with legal was resource and knowledge of the detailed knowledge of the regulations, and that then impacted on cost. It was incredibly expensive getting an IDRP through legal because they had to kind of go back to square one each time and understand the regulations. So, I mean, we do have, there's one I haven't yet mentioned to Michelle, that if it comes in, it will go to her on a stage 1 because I've been involved. It's actually an employer that may complain about something to do with a pension strain. So because I've been involved in that, the technical team at West Yorkshire are aware if they do make a complaint through IDRP 1 that's not to come to me, that's to go to Michelle to sign off. So, you know, we do ensure, and you know, as West Yorkshire do, that there is that nobody has had anything to do, any involvement in the decision that's made, but it does work much more smoothly now than it used to when we were with legal. We do get more timely decisions made on the administering authority side.
I will rest my case. And no, I mean, I think this has all been documented. We've looked at it. Okay, if that's best practice, then so be it. Anything else? No questions? Happy with the recommendation? We've discussed the report, considered whether we want to take any further. We don't, so we've noted it and happy with it. Right, item 11, training needs.
That's me. Thank you. So this is the board's normal opportunity to discuss any training which they've undertaken during the previous quarter. Before I hand over to you, I'll just highlight that a second Lola group training session has been arranged for Thursday the 23rd of May, and it's in this room and it'll start at 10 a.m. If any members of the board wish to attend that, then you're very welcome to, and you should have received the appointment in your diaries, although I know a number of you have already completed that training, and Dave, I think you were at the first one, so may well be at the second.
I will be at the second.
Wonderful. And then, as in previous years, we'll be asking you to complete a log of your training that you've undertaken during 23-24, and we'll send out a copy of the template to complete that and ask if you can return that by the end of May. So that's similar to in previous years. And then I'll hand over to you to discuss any training that you've completed recently.
Anyone done any training?
Well, as I say, the one I've done is Lola. I remember I'm sure it was the Kinks who used to do that, didn't it? Anyway, but so I've finished stage one. I mean, as I always say, I keep up to date with what is sent to me, but I've not done anything more formal than that in the last quarter. Excuse me.
Kim?
It's getting worse as the afternoon goes on. Thank you, Jim.
No, I've not done anything in the last 3 months. But is there a minimum that we have to do each year as a board member?
25 is good. 25 hours is good.
So there is the training policy that we brought to the July board last year. So Lola has to be done within the first 12 months. TPR regulators toolkit has to be done within the first 6 months. And then there is the expectation. I don't think we actually put a number of hours in there, but the expectation and under the requirements of being on the board that you maintain your knowledge and skills. So it's kind of about reasonableness, and as well, you know, obviously coming to pension board, attending training sessions or at the committee, that all counts towards training. So there isn't a set number of hours as such. It's just ensuring that you feel that you are still competent to be on the board, having undertaken required training. It's something potentially we could look at, whether there should be a minimum number of hours, but that's perhaps a discussion for July when we bring the annual training paper again to the board.
I mean, I've done quite a few things this last quarter, one of which was the investment conference in Edinburgh. And I've also finished Lola, thank goodness. That was in January. I've got various other things, I won't bore you with it, but one or two have concerned the general code. But I'll send you the details. Any...
Sorry, could I just add something, please? Just a reminder that obviously in every Monday email we do send out training opportunities, and the two kind of coming up in the next few months that would be relevant and useful for the board are the PLSA annual conference at the Cotswolds in June, which does have sessions specifically for board members, and the Border to Coast annual conference in July this year, which again just gives you that, you know, as we get more of our assets managed within Border to Coast, it's not about the investments, it's about the governance of Border to Coast and ensuring that our assets are properly looked after and how we're doing that. So just a reminder to keep a lookout in those Monday afternoon emails for training opportunities that we can assist you going on.
Okay, thanks for that, Jo. Are there any training requirements that anyone kind of wants to focus on for next time or in future months? I think there's so much around that it's a question of finding the time. Okay, well, let's have a look at recommendations. So, shared information, we've done that. There was any conference training feedback. Yeah, I thought I enjoyed the investment conference this year. I thought that was pretty good, actually. Consider if there's any further training required. That has to submit their training log. Is it going to be your normal template? Because I've been recording mine as I go along. I can just send you mine, can I? Right. Don't tell everybody. Okay, happy with that. So, work programme.
Yeah, that's back to me. So the work programme is attached at Appendix A. The next meeting in July contains the normal fund update, admin update, and 6-monthly update on the pension regulator's data scores. It also includes the draft annual report and accounts, an update on the admin shared service, where Ewan Miller from West Yorkshire will be attending, and then there's an update from LCC's internal audit planned for that meeting as well. Future months are included at Appendix A, but I won't run through the detail of those. And I suppose now is an opportunity if the board would like to think if there's anything further to add for future meetings, or the training logs actually ask if there are any training wishes that you've got for the future. So maybe that's an opportunity to pick up, for you to reflect, and then to pick up if there's anything further you want added at future meetings.
Anything?
Not at the moment.
No? Okay. I think there's sufficient on the agenda for 11th of July. Thank you. So the recommendation is to review the board's future work programme, highlighting activity for inclusion in the work programme. Okay, done that. So, consideration of exempt information. I'm quite sure why this is pink actually, but anyway.
Yeah, it is. It's commercial stuff, I suppose, isn't it?
Well, in accordance with section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the following agenda item has not been circulated to the press and public on the grounds it is considered to contain exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended. The press and public may be excluded from the meeting for consideration of this item of business.